Okay. All right. Welcome to the House Judiciary Committee on Tuesday afternoon, April 14th. We have some special guests here today, and is it okay for you to just kind of introduce the group?
Sure. I'm Joe Andriano. I used to sit over there, and this is the Orwell Village School Student Council. And maybe we'll just want to introduce themselves, say their name, what grade they're in.
I'm Joey, and I'm sister. And Jim. I'm Cassie in fourth grade. I'm Zadie, and I'm Claire.
Well, welcome. I hope
Where do you want
it?
it? Second.
All right, excellent. And then we have at the end here, if you could introduce yourself.
Brian Hill, sixth grade teacher at Orwell.
Okay, great.
I'm Janelle, I'm Claire's mom.
Okay, excellent. Welcome all of you, and I hope you've had a good day in the state's capital. So we're going to get started. We're looking at a bill continuing our testimony on S-193, an act relating to establishing a forensic facility for certain criminal justice involved persons. And we're going to start with Dr. Jill Bowen, Commissioner of the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living. Thank you so much for your flexibility and for being here. And
happy to be here, and what a great day.
yes.
Glad I came in a few minutes early because I could hear.
Yes, absolutely. We like visiting.
Makes me feel good about the future.
So if you identify yourself.
I'm Dr. Jill Bowen. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living, Dale.
Okay.
So I am here to talk with you about the forensic facility. Specific focus for us is people with cognitive challenges, people with developmental disabilities. There are others who might be in this situation, people with traumatic brain injury, dementia, et cetera. And for some of those folks, they may be in a position where there's a criminal justice intercept and they may have been accused of committing a crime serious enough to reach the level of what is in the current bill that's before you. And our position at Dale aligns with our Agency of Human Services. So you may have heard from some of our sister, brother, cousin departments. We are all one agency. And in addition to being the commissioner of Dale, I'm a member of the executive leadership team for the Agency of Human Services. And so there's a lot of conversation that has gone on related to this particular bill. So I want to make a statement that it's very important for us at this state to recognize that our constituents, the people that we serve, are both individuals who are challenged with certain different scenarios. In Dale, it's the people with any really sort of disability. There is a focus on older Vermonters and on those with developmental disabilities. But we also have a responsibility to the public and the safety of the public simultaneously. So easy peasy, right? Not. Simultaneously means that there are, let's like a Venn diagram, and some of the needs of individuals and some of the needs of the public don't always overlap. But this is a place where I think maybe we do find some place where we have some overlap in this bill. So happy to answer any questions I have with me.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Garabedia. I'm the Development Disability Services Division at the.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm wondering if Dan has any concerns or what your thoughts are on placing so much of this work within the Department of Corrections and how we'd start there.
Good question. I haven't met you all. This is the first time I'm before you. I'm here not quite 2 years yet, but you're.
So why don't I go around and we'll introduce ourselves, and I apologize. So I'm Mark Malone, representative from South Burlington, and my 12th year in this committee and 4th year as the chair.
Great.
Hi, I'm Representative Barbara Rachelson. I'm by profession a social worker, and I represent part of Burlington. Shipman 14, and been here, this is my 7th biennium.
Wonderful.
Hi, Ken Goslant, Northfield, Berlin, small business owner. Have no idea what I'm doing in this building, but obviously I'm in the legislature because I'm in here. And welcome.
I'm Angela Arsenault, a representative from Williston, and this is my 4th year on Judiciary, 4th year in the body.
I like the questions you were asking.
Karen Dolan, I'm a representative from Essex Junction.
Hi, Tom Oliver, Sheldon Swan, policeman.
Alicia Malay, Pittsburgh Proctor.
I'm Ian Goodnow, and I'm from Brattleboro.
Zach Harvey from Castleton. Alberta from West Rutland, 16 years in the building.
So
We also have one more person who's online. Go ahead, Coach.
I'm Kevin Coach Christie. Let's see, what's it been? Probably 6 years on Judiciary. Been in the legislature since 2010. Teacher, coach, counselor, social worker, and a number of other different cat lives. So we'll leave it at that.
yeah.
Thanks.
So let me just to introduce myself since I'm relatively new to Vermont. And you might be able to tell from my accent, but I am from New York, New York City, and spent most of my career there and the last 6 years before coming here in Philadelphia. So I have a broad experience. I'm a psychologist by training, broad experience working for New York City mayor, for working in Philadelphia, running the behavioral health system there. I did spend 9 years as a forensic psychologist working in New York City, and was doing competency evaluations, and I'm very familiar with the New York State approach, which has forensic facilities. So I have some like on the ground experience in this work. And so I'm happy to come to this table and to talk with you and answer your question. So your question, I believe, was, do I have concerns about the way this bill is written?
Or maybe I can reframe it and not be so leading, but like, what are your thoughts on, placing the responsibility largely with DOC?
Yeah, so DOC uniquely here, and you've probably heard this from others who may say this, but it's unique that it's part of the Agency of Human Services. I like that. I like that it's by having, worked with many corrections offices and been in that world. I like that it's part of the Agency of Human Services because so much healthcare goes on in that setting. Because it is part of the agency, so the Commissioner of Corrections is part of the executive leadership team of Agency of Human Services, just like I am. The kind of integration and conversations that go on make me feel actually quite comfortable that what will happen behind the walls would be something that's appropriate, something that would ensure that it's meeting the needs of folks as they go through competency restoration as it's identified in this bill.
Just one follow-up. Are you familiar? We don't have a lot of, I don't think that we as a committee have a lot of familiarity with the practices and experience of, for instance, WellPath or, contractors, because I understand the work would largely be contracted.
Well, just like all the healthcare in the corrections setting. So it is a contractor, but most of the services that we provide for the state are through contracts or designation or through right. So it's not the state that directly provides most of the care.
So in that case, I've never seen one of these contracts, and I'm wondering if the contractors are working under their own, guidelines, or if the state has an opportunity to influence practices.
I think there are expectations and deliverables that get baked into contract, including the need for evidence-based approaches, including what the timelines are, including what the deliverables would be quite a bit. I mean, the state is ultimately responsible for ensuring that it's an appropriate process, that it's done in a way that is respectful of the individuals who are going through the process, that it provides the care and the custody that's appropriate, and that it's also taking into account what the safety of the risks are. Again, through the, for developmental disabilities, there are certain approaches that are considered either best practice or evidence-informed practices, data-driven about what would need to be the assessment piece of determining someone's competence. For people with developmental disabilities, they may have never reached competence in their whole life, and it's about attaining competence or achieving competence. Some will, some won't, and making sure that the processes there are responsive to those realities, as well as risk assessment. That there are a number of risk assessments that are considered good tools. Again, data informed, data driven kinds of tools that are accepted in the field as risk assessments. There are sexual offender risk assessments. There are risk assessments. Currently, as part of the Developmental Disability Services, we do have a civil commitment under Act 248, and there are times people get released from that custody, and there are tools that are used, some of which were developed here in Vermont, but there are some tools to determine whether somebody is at risk for harming again or at risk for harming someone. And so those pieces of it, the competency assessment, the determination of not restorable to competence, as well as the risk assessment, are all important pieces of it. And, the right tools can be used in different settings. They can even be used in an out-person setting. So that's what would give me, that's what makes me comfortable with corrections as being part of AHS, and also at the same time feeling like, one of the things about this bill, because again, we're talking about safety, is that it's very narrow in terms of who this would impact, especially in the, for folks with developmental cognitive disabilities. We're talking about very small numbers of people who would rise to the level of alleged, right? So they are accused. And so one of the issues here is that they're accused of such a high seriousness of a charge that they would fall under this, right? Someone who could end up spending a life if they were convicted. The other piece of it that is something that's always on my mind when it comes to cases like this is that folks who are determined to not be competent to proceed have not been convicted of a crime, and really do need to have an option at clearing their name. Having an option to at least have a chance if they're restorable. Like I said, it's going to be somewhere around 50, maybe if they use the right methods, maybe half who might be restorable. And then will it the competence hold for this population? These are valid questions. But it does have a process for that built into the bill in terms of not restorable and being able to have other options happen at that point. So it's a long-winded way of saying yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And it's helpful to know that you have experience with forensic facilities. I think one of the pieces that we're trying to explore with this, kind of following up on the DOCs and how everybody's under AHS, is what should we have for expectations for oversight? Because everything's under the same one, like who's looking to make sure it's really working? Because it's kind of everybody's looking over each other, right? And so curious if you have suggestions as we continue to explore that, or what were the oversight mechanisms in New York?
Yeah, in New York. So there's just so many oversight mechanisms. What is there are a lot of people whose eyes are going to be on this that are already on this. I think critically important is what is actually happening and how, whether it's working, right? Because if it's working, then you're going to see a system where there's flow in the system, where there's people who are getting better in some ways, right? Depending on when it comes to developmental disabilities, that's different, let's say, than someone who perhaps has a mental illness or some other challenge. But you're going to be seeing that people are going to be able to come before the court more than they otherwise would have. And most of these people have been arrested and are in the jails anyways. It's not like they're not, and this bill is going to have them limited, but they will have more opportunity. So I think one thing is, what are the manifestations of a program like that? So you can see that that's visible. The courts are, there's public information there. I think, though, that there's always accountability within state government. There are constituents, and there are reports, and there's report outs to legislatures, there's advocates, there is just so much scrutiny and all. And in the agency, there's also reports. Everybody reports up through the governor. So that's one concern I didn't actually have. There were more eyes on it in New York City than, and I would imagine the same.
May I follow up?
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I guess for me, it's hearing that, but it's all under the same umbrella, right? So as far as where's the outside oversight to look in, right? Not saying that anything bad is going to happen, but if you're all under one department, there could be okay, we'll let that go, or we don't understand that, versus somebody on the outside that's coming and looking at the whole system. Did that happen in New York, or?
Well, there were, like I said, there were always eyes on what was happening in
Who
the
was the
system.
eyes?
It could have been the mayor, or the folks. It could be the governor, the governor's folks. There were times when I worked for the mayors, and other times when I worked for the Department of Health or other, right? There's always layers that you are accountable to. So there isn't like AHS sits somewhere where they're not accountable. They absolutely are. The thing about grouping and integrating services is for the people. That's how you serve the people best, right? For health and mental health and disabilities and aging and the Department of Children, Family and Corrections to all be rowing in the same way serves the people. It shouldn't be that these are fragmented, siloed off, right? There has to be that kind of, but the oversight is built into the way in which the structure is at a state, any kind of public service kind of system, but certainly at state government.
Thanks. It's great to have somebody with your experience in our state, and I can't believe we haven't met you yet. So, I have a couple of questions. One is, in the research that I've done, especially related to like some of the psychological journals, there's a lot of discussion about sort of best practice being not having people in a correctional setting. And one of the reports, Justin Well, Rethinking How States Approach Competency to Stand Trial, that Council of State Governments, the American Psychiatric Association, NCSL, judges and psychiatrists, they talk about people languishing in jail, and some spending longer amounts of time being evaluated and restored than they would potentially spend in jail if they were convicted. And that often after charges are dismissed, they re-enter without access to mental health. Another study talked a lot about the collaboration works best if we have departments collaborating together, which I think were your comments about AHS. But given that none of these people have been charged, and I want to get to your remark about, you said a lot of these people convicted, I'm sorry, that a lot of these people are in jail. My understanding is, like, we already have too many people in jail that are really there primarily driven by their mental health and or substance abuse or dual diagnosis. And if we were being able to provide adequate treatment earlier on, we would have not had them end up in prison. So
Wow, so that's a really big question.
I know.
Because you're going into prevention and efforts to address some of the factors that contribute to people ending up in with a criminal justice scenario. And so I'm going to just put that aside for a second because there's a lot of work that is done and can be done to try to prevent people from ever sort of landing in that situation. People with mental illness or people with developmental disabilities are often vulnerable and more likely to be victims, right? So we know that. For those who do end up with a criminal charge that are in jail, I mean, I'm gonna like quote Jackson versus Indiana to you, I'm sure you know. Right. So that was landmark, right? It's already now it's 72, I think. So it's already back quite a ways, but that was specific. There were a couple of key things in there, specifically that people should not be staying longer or languishing. That was, one of the key factors. And so this bill actually has like some exit opportunities built into it, which I liked, right? So there are opportunities, especially if you're determined non-restorable. And some other of the circumstances built into it. But in Jackson, that was the petitioner actually did want to be deemed competent. So there are factors here that would actually might serve to move it along more quickly than if they were just sitting there. And it's still a small, so one of the things about misdemeanors and what happened in New York City, misdemeanors, if you were not fit to proceed and it was misdemeanor, the charge was dismissed. I mean, this bill seems to get closer to that too. I think this will separate out these very high risk individuals. If you're taught, and also there's a difference when it's not one population when you talk about someone with disabilities or even with mental health. There in the developmental disabilities, you could be able to learn what you need to in order to, like through the Slater method or some other, that's really the one that has some real data behind it. And others are just not, right? So the difference between being over here in this setting where they're going to be working with you on restorability and being over here in this setting, this is going to be a very small. This is a small specialized unit. So I think it wouldn't really impact one way or the other your concern.
So I'm wondering, I know Department of Mental Health was saying they didn't feel they had the capacity to run the program. Does Dale have the capacity to run the program in consultation with DOC, working with Dale rather than the other way around?
So Dale actually doesn't run programs. We have a whole designated agency system, right? With
but oversee it. And again, Susan from the Disability Council on Friday suggested, I thought, a great idea, which is offer a rate more robust rate to provide the level of services that people need to be in this kind of secure restorative setting and put that out to the designated
agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, different, I think exactly how that would run or how that would be managed is to be determined. I'm not sure that we're quite there yet. Right. So I think there are many different ways in which you could set that up so that those who are providing the oversight and the actual restoring restorable activity are have the expertise to do it, have the qualifications. I think that that's going to be essential, whether it's through designated agencies or the state or WellPath or, you know, that's all, I think, it's really, it's less about the process and more about the outcome here, so that we're sure that the wherever it lands and who's actually doing that work and that oversight are expert in what they're doing.
And it seems like it will take a lot, like, is it worth us making DOC experts in these fields? Like when I worked at a designated mental health agency for 3 years, and we were heavily sort of regulated in terms of what we could or couldn't do. Most of the programs that I've worked at that are like either ADAP programs or licensed child placing or residential programs, there's so much sort of regulation and eyes, not just sort of the casual eyes on things, but the licensor coming in, you know. So there were ways to make sure that standards are being reached. And I know this bill doesn't flesh out what those standards would be, but that makes me nervous because it's just so important, especially for a really vulnerable population, to know that we're doing right by what.
This requires the expertise. There's no question about that. But determining right at this moment, like what that will be, is premature to get to having the bill go through. I can tell you that, you know, in Rikers Island, for example, the specialty unit for mental health, the correction officers that work there, it was incredible training that they got that served them wherever they went after that. There are so many folks currently in the prisons that are have some mental health challenge or some other challenge that it ends up being great that they got any kind of specialized training. That's what happened at Rikers Island, and some of those officers really loved that work, and some didn't really like it so much. But because it was a relatively small unit, this was, you know, the size of a city, Rikers Island, people actually had choice. So you know, I'm not sure exactly how that would play out, but it could be. When I toured Marble Valley to see some of that when I first came here. I just wanted to see what was there. I just had a conversation with some of the correction officers about what kind of training they had. Let's say a younger person came in, or someone with a disability, or someone with that. Some of them were interested in the idea of getting specialized training to work with a specialized population. So I don't think that if they needed a cadre of folks to be in this, that it would be overly demanding. I think it would be something that for many of them would be, you know, great. So I'm not seeing it necessarily as a negative or something that might overwhelm them.
I've got one last question, which is, should Vermont also, or I mean, what are your thoughts about Vermont looking into contracting with existing forensic programs in New York, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, given that it's so few people? And
I mean, to sending them there, having completely fallen in love with Vermont, I think it's important to be as close to home as you can.
absolutely,
Families should be able to come and visit with you. I mean, these folks haven't been convicted of a crime. They should be able to stay in contact with their family, friends, and to be able to be released right back to their community when it's appropriate for them to do so. And, you know, what we are trying to do is have them be able to be released when they're not a danger to the community, and so that they can have the kinds of relationships we would want them to have.
but in some cases, a program in Massachusetts is going to be closer. I know I worked with people in the women's facility, and families would need to get up at like 4 a.m. if they lived in Brattleboro or Bennington, to make visiting hours the women's facility, which was really hard if it was like little kids coming and
So I understand the regional, the border facilities. I mean, for our nursing home system, we have some border facilities. For some people, it's closer to go there. But I still think that we don't have one. It's a gap in our system.
it is, but to do it right, it's going to be really pricey.
I see.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
So I have a few questions. We'll kind of get back to how people end up there as opposed to what happens there. So there's treatment, you mentioned Slater method. There's some known competency restoration methodology for developmental disabilities, right? So
That's the one that really has some data behind it.
okay. And yet there's a forensic risk assessment tools. What tools do?
So here, they've been using the VOTIPS and SOTIPS, Vermont's. Yeah, I have it. So the VOTIPS is the Violent Offender Treatment Intervention and Progress Scale. I could say that more slowly if you want.
No, that's
Okay, SOTIPS is the Sex Offender Treatment Intervention and Progress Scale. One that is well known in the field is the VRAG, which is the Violence Risk Appraisal Guide. So there are methods to do that, and those are like the risk assessments. Are they likely to reoffend? Do they represent a risk? Are those the Slater is the competency,
right?
It's often done one-on-one with an individual. It could be done in a group, but usually it's one-on-one. And it's there is an intensity about it that you need to work frequently with the individual, probably several times a week, but certainly no less than once a week to help the individual understand the basics of what makes somebody competent, right? You understand the proceedings, you understand the charges against you, you can participate, work with your attorney in your defense. They have 5 modules. I mean, I can describe them a little, but you get the.
So is there treatment for folks who are developmentally disabled or have a TBI related to risk of bodily, in other words, violence prevention?
Yeah, I mean, the violence prevention tools there's like static factors and dynamic factors. So it should be applicable. Right now, we use the SOTIPS and the VOTIPS for people with developmental or intellectual disabilities who are in the Act 248 program. And you can see that over time, as the behavior actually becomes more manageable for an individual who maybe is having difficulty, you see that the score does align with it. And we really are not comfortable releasing somebody out of the civil commitment status if we don't see an assessment that speaks to low risk.
Right. But there's actual programs, treatment that could be occurring in the forensic facility, not just on the competency side, but on the violence side. Is that right?
Would it be helpful if
You should, yeah. Identify yourself for the record.
Yeah, so I'm Jennifer Garrity, and I'm the Developmental Disability Services Division Director. So individuals who are engaged in our program, who have any sort of challenging behavior, be it sort of tendency towards violence, would have a behavior support plan that identifies what those challenging behaviors are. It would look to identify antecedents or triggers, and then look to identify sort of therapeutic interventions. So it might be cognitive behavior therapy, dialectic behavior therapy. So those are some of the like more traditional therapies that you may have heard of. There might be other approaches. It might be sort of a mindful meditation group, things like that. So all kinds of approaches depending on the individual's level of need and functioning that they might be able to engage in. Many of them are very traditional approaches that any of us could benefit from. But some of those things that Dr. Bowman is talking about is approaches that would look to identify and treat and support some of the triggers and and sort of behaviors that are causing the violence, that would then be assessed in those risk assessments to determine recidivism over time.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. So part of the reason I asked is right now, and this is something we're working on this next version of the bill, and working with state's attorney as well, is that right now somebody can be found not restorable. We'll talk about in the developmental disability arena, and they're held unless they're no longer violent. So assuming that there's a showing, presumably by the state's attorney, that the individual does continue to pose a risk, substantial risk of bodily injury is the language we use, that they're there to perpetuity according to where the language is right now. Because there isn't like any check-ins sometime down the road to see if the person's no longer violent. It's something I'm fixing, something that we're fixing to make clear that
You're saying
there is that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so only if they are actually non-restorable and they are released, then there's this kind of monitoring. But it's not clear that there's ongoing opportunity to address the violence part so that they can maybe step down. And that's why I was just asking those questions, because I want to understand it's that there is that kind of treatment. So if the person's not restorable, still can work on the person's tendencies towards. So
we do that on an out in the community commitment space. We do that.
So I guess my next question related to that is that you have somebody non-restorable, they're found to still be a substantial risk of bodily injury. If there's a check-in at some point after that, would there be the possibility that they're no longer appropriate for the forensic facility? There's a step down that maybe, there's still risk, but the risk has been reduced. What's the next step down? I would assume in a community supervision of some sort.
It could be, right. So if they meet the criteria for Act 248, it could be commitment, it's civil commitment. And so then they would be under the supervision of the commissioner, technically.
Right.
Right. And so they might meet the criteria for that, because the funny place there is that currently the rule reads that they're not competent and they have committed a particular crime. And if they are then released without an effort to restore to competence, they would come right out to the community and actually could be committed to the Act 248 program, in which case they are required to be under supervision and required to attend the kinds of programs that Jen just described. And those are effective programs. Not everybody succeeds, and some people succeed more quickly than others, but it is evaluated on an annual basis.
And how is the Act 248 criteria different than the criteria to go into the forensic facility?
So it has to be an intellectual disability, and so it's narrow, and it has to be a significant charge. So in this case, it's a significant charge, but it's broader in terms of what the challenges are. It's diagnostic agnostic. How's that? I didn't even do that on purpose. So it's not about what the diagnosis is. It's about the fact that somebody has this really high level of charge and is determined to be not competent, right? So
Is that the Act 248 or is that the forensic?
no, this is what's in this bill,
Here, okay.
right? So it's much more narrow in terms of fits into the requirements of the eligibility to come into Act 248. This is really being sort of more equitable. It's not about the diagnosis or what the person's challenge is, because we're talking about the legal definition of being competent, right? Which cuts across, so many challenges that the person might have or situations that the person might have. Whereas Act 240 is specific for people with intellectual disabilities, and there's a narrowness about it. It's not even all developmental disabilities, it's intellectual disabilities. It's like different.
You know, so and I guess just to make sure I'm following this. Person's found not to be restorable, and there's a determination that the person still presents the substantial risk of bodily injury. That second consideration, the substantial risk of bodily injury, that's different than what Act 248 criteria would be?
It is. It's much higher,
Okay,
right? I mean, it's like, this is
so
specific.
this is much higher than
Well,
Act.
Well, it could be that somebody who was accused, I mean, there could be overlap. I'm going to do my Venn diagram thing now. There could be overlap. But in this case, what does not happen for the people that come into civil commitment is that they don't get an opportunity to be, it's not about restoring their competence.
Right.
That is just not part of the process at all. Right. So they're accused, and because they have the charge, then they come into Act 248 if they meet those criteria.
Right.
And that's part of the gap that we were talking about in the system, is that we don't have a place where that happens.
Right, and
Yeah.
my point only is that if, all right, we tried to restore, that's not gonna happen. Is this person appropriate, is it appropriate placement for them to be in this DOC forensic facility as opposed to community supervision kind of through Act 248? And I think that should be the consideration at that time, and then perhaps periodically, you know, is this still the right placement, or is there something less restrictive, though still?
Yeah, so let me say this, right? So in Act 248, if the person's risk of reoffending and dangerousness is so high, then we might say we can't take that person.
Sure, then he would stay in the forensic facility.
He would, no, I'm saying now, he would probably stay in.
With this bill?
Yeah,
I mean, with
no,
this-
even without this bill. Like, so if somebody meets the criteria, but they're too dangerous to come, there is a place in the Act 248 to say, we won't be able to manage, right? And sometimes there are challenges in the community with some of the folks, and it can take quite a bit of effort to contain and keep the public safe. What's happening in this bill is that during this time of opportunity for restorability, if I want to say it, that during that period of time, they can have that intervention that gets them, you know, to a place where either they're going to go to court, or at that point, if they're not restorable, I believe they can even petition, and their defense attorney could petition for them to be evaluated to see if they can. I think there's several levers.
That part's
there.
not clear.
Okay, so that's what you were.
That's what, so I just to be, and I won't beat this anymore. We're not allowed to say beat a dead horse since our animal cruelty bill, so I did say that, I apologize.
It's not allowed.
I just strike that from the record.
Yeah, exactly. So it is that there needs to, the way it's written right now, and we're gonna fix it, is that it's not a clear exit once you're restorable, not restorable, and violent. And I want to make sure that is an open exit, because otherwise we're vulnerable to a constitutional challenge on this. So that's kind of what I'm looking
Not
for.
restorable and violent, yeah.
And you're held into perpetuity unless there are these other escape places.
I think not in.
Not escape. I don't mean.
I think not in perpetuity, because they'll go back to Jackson on that, so it's not
Right.
in perpetuity.
Right. So we're just, and I know under Jackson, it's like, if it doesn't work here, you go into civil commitment. I mean, if they're not restorable, you go into the civil commitment process. And that's what saves the constitutionality of plan. Here, it's not clear we have that, but we're going to try to make that clear. And I just wanted to understand, and it sounds like from what you're saying, that, you know, there is treatment, that a person is not going to be forever violent necessarily.
Right.
They could become less risky so that they would have an opportunity to move to a less restrictive.
Right, right. All of what you're saying is right. And yes, there needs to be an exit and regular evaluations that are on set timelines. And I do believe that was in there, but just you're taking a different.
We're just making it
Yeah.
clear that it's not clear that it is, but.
Right, but sure, of course, that would have to be, if you're not restorable, you're not restorable. So that process has already now run its course. And it's going to be a fairly large number of people with disabilities who either are not restorable or restores even, like, because it may never have achieved it in the first place.
Right.
And so not achievable or attainable is the term. And that has to be clear.
Well, one last question, then over to Angela. So this doesn't have like any kind of definitive end date, and I know some states will say, you're gonna try this for 2 years. If that doesn't work, you have to go in a civil commitment process. You have to have a different process.
Mhm.
Do you have any, how does New York do that? Do you have any recommendations? Should we say, so we're not gonna keep trying to restore the person forever? You know,
Yeah.
if they say, yeah, this person is restorable, that's 6 years later, we're still not there, but darn it, we're gonna keep
Oh,
trying.
yeah,
But
that's like,
is there like some period where we say, all right, you got 2 years, you got 3 years, and after that, it's got to be the civil commitment.
yeah, I think, so I think like the 6-month cycles, but then what ends up happening is that if you reach an impasse at some point, then it would be like you would check the annually, right? So,
You check the restorability.
yeah, you want to make sure you've done that, but 6 months is an important time frame to be checking and, to having some ability to see whether it's having an effect. For some people with developmental disabilities, you want to be careful that you're not, that they're not staying longer just because you're still working on restorability. There needs to be a call that it's not restorable.
So should we have like right now, there's no data. Right now there is, you can start looking at the second 6-month period to see if they're restorable.
Right.
But if they say, well, we keep on trying, I mean, should we, and the reason I'm asking is that.
There should be an end date.
Right.
I can't tell you right now. We can check and see what other states may be doing or what we're comfortable with. I think that it could turn. There was something in here, I believe, where they can petition themselves for another evaluation, which I liked. That they have an opportunity to do that themselves too.
Yeah, and I think that's primarily, if I'm not mistaken, that not guilty by reason.
And the non-restorable, I think both.
I will
Check that.
That is there.
That- I thought that was part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, Angela, sorry.
Sir. So I'm wondering about on this, I guess, same line of questioning that, say the person has been found to be not restorable after some amount of time that we would hopefully delineate. But it's determined, looking at page 2 of the bill as passed. The Senate, lines 15 through 17, cannot be restored to competency, would not create a substantial risk of bodily injury to another person. So that then this person is going to be released, but under a certain, what we don't want to call conditions of release, because that implies the ability to charge a new crime if they violate. So under some sort of court order to take their medicine and things like that. And the idea, as I understand it, is that they'll be supervised and helped in doing that. We had heard testimony on Friday that it might be useful to have folks who are specially trained for this and maybe it's not probation and parole coming out of the PNC office, but the phrase forensic specialty team is used for as something that, group social workers probably who are specially trained for this type of supervision or support. Do you have any experience,
so
anything like that?
I don't want to predetermine like who would or could have that expertise. I can tell you that there have been parole officers that have been incredible, and some of the folks that I have worked with who have gotten trained, who deeply involved in the success of the individual under their charge. So I think we want to make sure that there's appropriate training, but not necessarily predetermine who could carry that out. And I also just want to say, you had asked about oversight, and I said it was premature. I think that it's going to require rulemaking and all to make sure, but there would be oversight and quality at every step of this. So I think we don't want to predetermine, like, it's got to be, a social worker X number of years. It's got to be people who are appropriately trained, committed to the work. They could be parole officers. I've seen it with my own eyes. And I can tell you that I was surprised when I first met some of the parole officers and saw what was going on and what they were advocating for the individuals that are under their care. And, it flips our preset sort of notions about the folks who are charged with sort of the control and containment maybe of the people, that there are some really great folks out there who with the appropriate training. So I want to be cautious of that. I want to be cautious of predetermining what those rules and rulemaking could be. That would be the oversight of the quality and the system and making sure that all of this was happening. But that's what building, the program and the system is about.
Yeah, and I appreciate that focus on training. I think that is what I meant to say. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And so thank you for making sure that I'm framing that correctly, because it could be someone in a bunch of different positions or professions who receive the proper training. But I am worried about any sort of assumption that because someone is a probation officer, they can effectively help someone with complex needs manage those complex needs.
So what I think, and I appreciate this, people go through their particular professional training, and it may or may not include some of what we're talking about here. And so we want to make sure that they have that level. And you may bring people in to the system that has expertise or that is trained or expert in the Slater method, or it may be already there, or you would build it in. But that's the next layer, I think, of what would need to be put into place to achieve the ends that what are recommended here.
Yeah, and I think I'm thinking about this idea as something perhaps bigger than for just this purpose as well, because if we did have specially trained folks, we might have a more effective means of supporting people on orders of non-hospitalization who don't meet the criteria for forensic facility and things like that, like just better supporting.
So one thing
out in our community.
I appreciate, to me, it's just helpful for me when I think there's a small question here, which is, what about people who are not competent and who need some competency restoration and are not getting it right now? That's kind of this question. The system and the different places where there can be improvement, it stimulates questions about that. But these are two separate things. Please, let's talk more.
So
What do you do? We can have
We're
coffee.
about 5 minutes late for your.
Oh, yeah.
But just really interesting.
Thank you for the
and
time.
We're gonna have to circle back around with questions from you and from Coach later.
The other
But-
committee has skipped you.
Okay, all right, well, then we can have them ask those questions.
They're
because
coming back.
They're gonna come back.
Yeah, does that mean I don't have to
I'll
go?
check in.
We'll check in.
I'm happy to pop over there.
Well, the good thing about having Alice Emmons as the institute, my understanding from her in another conversation we had a while ago, is that back in the early 2000s, they were specifically training DOC personnel, and I think also probation, just that.
Well,
And that program was canceled. I think it was during the Douglas administration, but you can ask, you can.
I can because we're all on the same team. I just want to say that whether it's that way that it's done or this way that it's done or this way, there will be necessary quality requirements for it. So I don't know that we have to pre-state how that will happen. I think, and maybe we do. I mean, you're the legislators. For me, it's like, well, we do have a gap. We are trying to close that gap. We want people to have due process. I would love for people with developmental disabilities to be cleared of crimes if they didn't commit them. But also to be able to get back into the community appropriately and not stay there forever. This is the, the way that we balance. I think this is a really, it's a good step in the direction I think that is just missing right now in our system.
So we'll have a couple more questions. We'll keep track of when they need you down there, but Ian and then Coach.
Perfect. They're ready for you whenever you can get over there.
Is this whatever?
They're going to circle back to you.
Each one, we're done
So-
with one.
Why don't you go ahead, Ian and Coach, and then those will be the last two questions.
Yeah, and I'll keep it
Keep them short.
really brief. My only question is, so we're dealing with a legal standard as far as competency. Then we have like all these medical standards that were, and they it's easy to have them overlap, but like really talking competency. I was having a conversation with a couple of people about this over the weekend about how other states handle competency, and that it is such an ebb and flow of competency, and that like some states will take someone to trial and pause the trial, like when there's a question of whether someone is currently competent, and then start the trial back up once competency is restored. So it's like this constant back and forth. I'm curious from Dale's perspective, is that could that be an issue with kind of how this bill is structured, where it's like a switch, like we either have restored competency or not, and we have this concern of, well, the switch has not been flipped, and this person's dangerous, so we're holding them in perpetuity. We want to make sure that's not the case. But what if it's like someone where some days they are competent, some days they're not? And I'm wondering, from Dale's perspective, does this bill explore that nuance of competency enough to actually successfully get somebody to their constitutional right to trial and resolve their criminal case?
So, like I said, there's going to be many who are not.
Yeah.
Its competency is not attainable. And for some, it'll be clear earlier than for others. And like I said, they're not people with developmental disabilities, not a monolith.
Yeah.
Right. There are those whose IQs are kind of in the borderline range, and they're much more likely to be able to achieve some level of competence, and others who will not. And those who are not, once it's clear, they're not going to suddenly get competent. So that you're talking about narrowing the population that you're talking about, where something like that could happen. The Slater method is a very pragmatic method. It's not like you're providing a treatment that now makes them, right. You're educating them, or you're teaching them in a very part of it, like you're role playing and you're explaining things in a way that can make sense and can be integrated for the person. So they're basically learning what, just what it is they need to know in order to ask maybe a question or to understand what's happening for them. Can that slip and go back? It can. It does happen where a person understood it and then maybe doesn't quite understand it, or when they're maybe in the situation as opposed to the mock role playing. Yeah, but a lot of times it does hold. So there is some variability, with the folks. Some of it depends on how much they can have that relationship with their attorney and how much the court may be able to make accommodations for their comfort if they're going through a case of trial. Many times the cases are dismissed, or it doesn't go to like a trial. I mean, that is probably more common than the scenario that you just said, where they're on trial. A lot of times it doesn't even get to a trial, more typically in the system.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, Coach, last question to you.
Coach.
He's on. You have to unmute yourself.
I was in that zone. Doctor, thank you so much for coming. And my thought is, being that Dale um, is another division, and DOC, at least at the moment has the um, responsibility. The question is, because you had mentioned rulemaking, would it make sense to put together a small, um, I know people don't like study groups, but right now, because of the unique nature, of, our situation, being that corrections and Dale are working together, on this, and have certain administrative overlaps. How do we move it forward? In a reasonable and cost-effective way as well, for both sides, both the public interest, and that of the client.
I think a study group would probably slow it down. I'm not sure that that's what's needed. I mean, it's gonna already, if this makes it through, there will be processes that need to be further developed. To me, it's a gap that can be closed, and then there's work that needs to be done.
So
Beyond that.
basically you're comfortable with moving forward with the existing model? I mean, that and the new bill.
Yes, yes. And then all of the things that I said that would have to be built onto it. And I think
Right.
the rulemaking process is important because it will get into things like quality, and it will get into things like oversight. And I think,
Yeah.
that there'll be plenty of, shared conversation and activity that would go on there.
And hopefully also cover Representative Arsenault's point around, the training and CEUs, and any certifications needed, by folks.
Right. Right. By the way, I love that you said you were in the zone, because I think of you now as a coach, so.
Exactly. All right, well, thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
I
Pleasure.
assumed you were kind of a tag team here, that you're not sitting separate. Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So Charlie,
Yeah.
thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon. I'm Charlie Glitzerman. I'm the policy director at the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. And appreciate the time to share some recommendations to strengthen victims' rights within the context of S-193. During testimony earlier this session, feels like a century ago, on H627 concerning victims' rights in forensic cases, this committee expressed some interest in further consideration of some of the issues that came up in that bill in the context of this forensic facility system. And so we are very happy to recommend a couple changes to support victims' access to justice, safety, and healing within the system. I have submitted some written testimony to Nate that has some specific language changes, and I will walk through those for you and would be happy to answer any questions. S-193, as passed by the Senate, includes some language already that ensures a victim's right to be heard at any hearing under Section 3, which governs the procedures for individuals found not guilty by reason of insanity and their interactions with a forensic facility. And as we discussed earlier this session, providing victims the opportunity to speak directly with the court supports their healing. It can restore a measure of agency within the criminal legal system that victims often do not experience. And it can also help ensure that decisions are made with full awareness of the harm that was experienced as a result of the act. To clarify and strengthen implementation of this right, we have a couple proposed additions within this language. that are informed by both existing criminal procedure and testimony on victims' rights and forensic cases you all heard earlier this session. Our first suggestion is to mirror language from Title 13 that details how a victim will have the opportunity to be heard in court. So it specifies that the court will ask if the victim is present and whether they'd like to be heard. And if they are not present, the court will ask if the victim has expressed orally or in writing their views. I think this language would just really clarify how in practice this right to be heard would operate.
Which section are you saying from Title 13?
It is in 13 BSA 5321. It's in the sentencing proceedings and plea hearings.
Great, thanks.
Our second suggestion also comes from that language, which just simply clarifies that the prosecutor's office should give a victim advance notice of the hearing. And then our third suggestion is drawn from discussion on victims' rights and forensic cases from earlier this session. Adding language that states that if a victim isn't provided with notice of the hearing as required, that the hearing will be continued so that the victim will have an opportunity to be heard. Additionally, we understand that the existing language was intended to apply to hearings both for individuals found not guilty by reason of insanity and for individuals found incompetent to stand trial. But as it's drafted, I believe it only applies to the former. And so we would request additional language to clarify that a victim's right to be heard and those related procedures applies in both cases. I have another couple recommendations, but I'm happy to answer any questions on court procedure pieces.
Questions on those yet? I think it's fairly straightforward. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. So my next section, in addition to victim notification around court procedures, is some recommendations around access to timely information about significant changes in a person's status, such as transfers or discharges from a forensic facility. These kinds of information are essential to victims making informed safety plans. Existing statutes outline a victim's right to notification when, say, a person is transferred from a hospital or a secure residential facility to a community on an order of non-hospitalization. And this committee has heard that in a small state like Vermont, gaps in these notifications have resulted in victims unexpectedly encountering the person who harmed them at work or in their neighborhood. And these experiences are very destabilizing and re-traumatizing. So recognizing a victim's need for consistent, reliable, and timely information to preserve their safety, we are asking for some policies that ensure those rights are effectively realized. And one of the ways that we would like to do that is request that the committee add language that within rulemaking, there are some rules specific to victim notification within the forensic facility system that include consideration of what events within the forensic facility would trigger victim notification, what entity would provide that notification, whether it's the Department of Corrections, whether it's the prosecuting officer, whether it's DMH or another entity, how victims will be informed of their right to receive notification, and what processes will allow a victim to opt in or out of any or all notification to maximize their choice. That's what I have for y'all today. I appreciate your time and consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So that second bit, as far as the notification of forensic facility, are you anticipating that would be part of the Vines system? Would that, would we just, the problems that we've been having with Vines would be here as well? And hopefully the solutions too, of course. But.
It's a great question. And I would just note that this committee heard testimony last session about a working group to improve victim notification in post-conviction through Vine. And that working group's been doing some really wonderful work. It dissolved in February 15th, but we continue to be in conversation and look forward to continuing to convene in some form during the off session to continue that work. But yeah, I think it's an it's my understanding that it's an open question about exactly how victims would be notified, if it would be through Vine and DOC's Victim Services Unit or another entity. And, you know, of course, I think that if those state entities are ready to like name those details, we'd be happy to have them codified in state law. But recognizing that some of these details will be worked out in rulemaking, that's something that we'd be happy to see there.
And were these things brought up to the Senate as well, and they just declined to incorporate them, or was this not brought up before the Senate?
Yeah, with this committee's intention to come back to victims' rights in forensic cases, you know, we wanted to see where the bill was landing in some of these policy decisions that the Senate was making, because they did heavily impact what recommendations we would have. And so we did not discuss this language specifically with the Senate.
And today was kind of supposed to be our victim day, but we have Jen Pullman tomorrow. She was unable to join us today. So this next version of the bill will not have this victim stuff in it, presumably, but we'll have discussions in here and some additional testimony. And I guess version 3 will probably, because I definitely see that we're lacking certainly some of the notification stuff in here that we had in that other bill. So other questions for Charlie? All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll hear from Jordan next, and I believe Jordan is our last witness, I believe.
Yeah, I actually do have one question, and I don't know.
For Charlie?
I think it might be for Charlie.
Okay, yeah.
Or so you want to add the victim notification or the guilty by reason of insanity as well, that it's clear right now that it's for the incompetency, but, or do I have it the other way around? Oh, okay, in that case. I was going to ask, is there still a victim after the case has been adjudicated? But I guess if we're saying that they have an ability to speak on it for the guilty by insanity, then it doesn't matter. So never mind.
It's going to be the release of the individual. So
yeah, so it's never mind.
Transfer, and there's other information that victims learn.
Yeah, well, in that case, we definitely should clarify that it's both. The other one makes more sense.
Absolutely. And it's my understanding, just based on conversations with stakeholders asking why, that was the intention, that it apply in both cases. And so we hope that can be clarified here.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Austin.
We'll hear from Jordan next. Thank you for being here, and just yourself for the record and proceed.
Yes, good afternoon, members of the House Judiciary Committee. For the record, my name is Jordan Souter, and I'm the policy advocate for the ACLU of Vermont. And I want to thank you all for inviting me here to testify on S-193. I want to start off by saying that we appreciate the need that Vermont has in creating a forensic facility. This is an important issue and has been for a while, so we appreciate the time that this committee has taken in listening to testimony on this. Having said that, we are deeply concerned about housing the forensic facility within the Department of Corrections. As this committee has already heard from the Defender General's office, as well as other key witnesses, it is unconstitutional to incarcerate someone who has been deemed not competent to stand trial, or someone who has been found guilty by not guilty by reason of insanity. Therefore, the function of the forensic facility must be solely for the evaluation and treatment of the people involved in the legal system and not be akin to a carceral setting. And this is something that S-193 appears to consider, as it provides on page 11 of 16, lines 9 to 13, that the forensic facility shall...
Could you get, I'm sorry.
11 of 16.
Okay.
That the forensic facility shall be designed and operated in a manner that supports a therapeutic, recovery-oriented, and trauma-informed environment comparable to a community-based residential treatment setting. Prison systems are not, nor have they historically been, a therapeutic environment. On top of that, we've heard from the Department of Corrections themselves testify about some of the issues that they are currently facing. Their facilities are operating at well over capacity with neither enough spaces nor beds. and are experiencing some pretty severe staffing shortages. And this is especially prevalent at CRCF, where the current population is at 181 today, and their capacity is at 177. And under these conditions, DOC is struggling to provide services to the people currently under their custody. And so this alone calls into question DOC's capacity to effectively manage a forensic facility that they would be legislatively mandated to run as a therapeutic environment. Now, we also recognize the legislative constraints that other departments like DMH have in being able to operate the facilities themselves, and that DOC as well as DMH maintain that they would be able to implement this bill with bolstered resources. But many questions still remain. Questions we should know first before committing to placing the forensic facility in an already strained department. How many resources will DOC require? How do they plan to create and maintain a therapeutic environment? Where will it be located? These are very important questions when trying to establish a forensic facility. Now, I also understand that this bill includes an interim report section where DOC, in consultation with the other relevant state departments, will submit a report addressing some of these logistical concerns by, I think, October. At which point, by my understanding, the committee could theoretically reassess the situation if need be. Does that sound like a fair representation of how the previous testimony on the interim report? We generally are supportive of this provision of the bill, but for the time being, believe that that section should be the primary focus of S-193. Because ultimately, it sounds like that the question that we have not answered yet is how would DOC establish and maintain a secure forensic facility as a therapeutic environment? And many concerns have been raised regarding the legality of housing it under the DOC. And it seems that the legislature, through the various committees, have not thoroughly explored alternative options as of yet. So we propose that this committee use S-193 to create a study into the feasibility of establishing a forensic facility within the Department of Corrections. This would give DOC and its partners time to solidify their proposal, as well as give the legislature time to answer these important questions, as well as potentially explore alternatives. And if it's determined after the study that it is feasible to house it under the Department of Corrections while maintaining the constitutionality of the facility, then we can proceed that way. But we should really understand the how before committing to a plan that runs the risk of being unconstitutional and harmful. Plus, it's my understanding that this would be the first time that Vermont is officially creating a forensic facility, something that would be potentially a great benefit to our systems and help ensure public safety. So it's especially important that we are doing everything we can to make sure that we are doing it well and build something that won't potentially end up breaking the very law that we're seeking to implement. Thank you. That is my testimony, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, questions for George? So, my understanding, just to answer the setup here, is that we will have this report in October, but there's another check-in really is the rulemaking. Any rulemaking has to be put in place before this is operational, and that has to go through the legislature as well. We do check the rulemaking. So I guess the question, any comments on, I know that you've really focused just on the DOC, but has you looked at the constitutional issues as far as the processes that are being set up for how or who is sent to a forensic facility, or do you not have any viewpoint on that?
I don't have any position on that at this time. It's still something that we're looking into. It is a very complicated.
And there will be a new version, which I think clarifies a lot of that procedure as well. So,
but ultimately, there are still many questions that we still want answered, and we think that it would make sense in the field of balance to explore those options, make sure that it's something that can be done, hear what the specific proposals that DOC has in establishing a forensic facility. First, and not necessarily like putting us into a corner where we would potentially have to repeal the law if it's determined that it was not feasible.
Right. And one other thing, I don't know if you've checked in with the Corrections and Institutions Committee, because I mean, although we are trying to understand what happens in the forensic facility, I think it's important for our understanding that ultimately any changes in what we're doing there is not this committee's jurisdiction. Our committee's jurisdiction is really the first three sections of the bill. Though, of course, we're very interested in what, in fact, we have the commissioner of the Department of Corrections coming in tomorrow to understand that, because we certainly weigh in on that. But ultimately, you should make sure that you do have an audience in corrections and institutions as well. I'll suggest that as well.
Yes, I think I'm scheduled to testify tomorrow
Okay, all right.
morning. And a lot of these questions are questions that House Corrections has also raised themselves.
Right. Appreciate it. Any other questions for Jordan? All right, not seeing any. That's so the other witness just submitted written testimony. That is what's her name here again? Horton Dick. Of course, I got rid of that, so I can't. But what's that? Thank you, Julian Horton Dick has submitted her testimony in writing. So who is it? It is a. Well, you'll have to read the testimony. It's right there. I'll leave that to you. So tomorrow, just real quickly, before we adjourn at this full hour, because let's see. So very quickly, tomorrow we have some more witnesses on S-193. We have, like I mentioned, Commissioner Murad, somebody from the Division of Racial Justice Statistics. We have a citizen, Emily Perry, and Jennifer Pullman. Tomorrow afternoon, we're going to look at an updated version of S-208. I'll get this out to everybody so you can see it in advance. And the plan is by Thursday morning, we're going to have an updated version that really works on the first two sections, I think, of this. No, section 1 and section 3. The section 2 is fine. That works on section 1 and section 3. Been working with Jared Bianchi and others on that. And hopefully we will then have Jared, Judge Zone, Matt Valerio in again on Thursday morning to give their initial thoughts on that updated revised version. And probably because we're going to have a little extra time, maybe we'll get back to 203 and actually try to vote out S-203 on Thursday morning.
We have the amendment to review tomorrow.
And tomorrow, that's right. We do have to look again at the amendment, the updated amendment to S-218. We'll try to keep it very narrow because I think the changes.
So is it a new amendment? Does it have to be? Does the other one have to be pulled and then,
218, yeah, I think.
and then a new amendment is presented?
I don't think it ever even got on the calendar, so.
It got sent out.
It got sent out by Nigel.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, he'll be playing that. Having the.
And I just wonder if it's gonna be on the floor yet, that he has to pull it.
I don't think so. I think it's just gonna be a substitute amendment.
Okay.
I think that's how it works. Yeah, probably.
So I'm wondering if we can hear from some of the designated agencies or their representatives.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Oh,
I see Amy in the room.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Especially, I know it was suggested that the medical director at Howard is also on the Yale.
Yeah, I was planning on having her come in actually.
And that might be different than from. Yeah.
That is, I have her name here somewhere.
It's.
Thank you, yes. Yeah, I was actually planning on reaching out to her and yes, Cindy Robin. Did I pronounce that right, Robin?
Raven?
Right.
Raven?
I think it's Robin.
I don't know.
So yeah, I'll see if she's available on Thursday as well, because I think we have space for that on Thursday. Any questions? Oh, one last thing. Next Tuesday, 5 to 7 is the required public hearing on proposal for the constitutional amendment.
Is it gonna be in the well?
in room 11. I don't think we're gonna have quite as many people if it's anything like last biennium's public hearing. We had single digits who testified. So, but it's something we're required to do.
Is that the joint?
Not joint, just us. Yeah, just us. Anything else before we go off live? All right, we're off live. Adjourned until tomorrow, I should have said.